Hello and welcome to 24 Panels Per Second, the comic-based movie and TV review show from the Comic Crush. I'm your host, Paul. I'm going to be joined by Liz in just a second. The Comic Crush, in case you don't know, is a website that's all about the love of pop culture, especially comics, movies and TV. You can head there now, comiccrush.com, for reviews, essays, news and more. And if you join our Patreon from just £2 per month and help keep us going, you'll get bonus videos, advanced looks at articles and money off on our web shop with a great selection of Marvel, DC and indie comics, back issues and complete sets. Follow us on Facebook, find us on Twitter and Instagram at The Comic Crush, and make sure you keep up with everything going on thecomiccrush.com. Let's say hello to my fine fettered co-host, Liz. Hello.
Hello.
Hiya.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. It's really good to see you. How are you doing?
Yeah, great. Excited to talk about our topic of the week.
Yes.
Newest release from Marvel Cinematic Universe. My fave. And that would be...
you know, is it still your favourite? It's funny enough.
Do you even have to ask Paul, really?
We are going to talk about Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania, in just a second. But I do want to kind of gauge something from you first. And that is I'm always interested in your level of excitement going in. So I've devised a little multiple choice thing for you.
Oh, go on.
You've got 3 levels here that you can pick from. So I want to know, were you at excitement level Cersei, which is, kind of a low level of excitement, not that interested, sort of kind of a bland level of excitement, I would say. Were you at excitement level Cap, which is a more dependable, more excited level, always ready for the action, but, just a dependable, solid level? Or were you at excitement level Tony, which is, off the hook, anything can happen, you're drinking, you're in an Iron Man suit, you've got, repulsor rays or whatever it is at your disposal. Anything can happen. So, Liz, going in, we'll come back to this at the end as well to find out what excitement level you were at when you left. But I want to know, going in, what excitement level were you at?
Level Stark. I mean, always.
I knew it. It never changes.
It's dependable. I mean, I know that dependable was supposed to be Cap level, and since I like to be, a mixture of both Cap and Iron Man, I'm dependably super excited.
But we'll come back at the end and we'll figure out what excitement level you're at when you left the theatre, because that's also what I'm interested in. I'm interested in anticipation versus actuality and what happened. So I'm going to just give you a quick synopsis for Ant-Man and the Wasp. I mean, it's not a great detailed synopsis, but hey, what can I tell you? Ant-Man and the Wasp find themselves exploring the quantum realm, interacting with strange new creatures and embarking on an adventure that pushes them beyond the limits of what they thought was possible. I mean, yeah, as I feel that's a bit loose.
Yeah, it's a little soundbite really for what actually commences.
Yeah, I mean, so I was at sort of a dependable level of excitement. So I was at level Cap, in case you were wondering. I'm sure you were. I didn't want you to lose any sleep over that tonight. I didn't want you laying in bed and suddenly thinking, oh, what level of excitement was Paul at? As I'm sure you often do.
I'm sure, I'm sure all of our fine audience thinks about this sort of thing a lot.
But yeah, so going in, I'm kind of at a steady level with the Marvel universe now, where I'm neither overwhelmed with excitement nor completely disinterested. But I'm always just interested in the MCU stuff now, and I'll save my excitement for having the final product. So this is third Ant-Man film, possibly final Ant-Man film. Since the Marvel, I mean, Thor is the only character we've gone to 4 movies on, right?
So far.
And that has been a bit hit and miss as we discussed in our Love and Thunder pod ages ago. This has been. I rewatched the first two Ant-Man movies before going to see this one.
Interesting. I did not actually. Right. I think I'm going to watch the first two again now after the fact.
Yeah, and again, I'll be interested in coming back in a couple of weeks and whatever pod we do next, and talking to you about that experience, because I really enjoyed rewatching those first two, and I found them to be even more like I kind of almost forgot just how funny Ant-Man and the Wasp, the second film in particular, was. And I think that kind of queued me up nicely to go into this one. And it's so strange that they've gone. I mean, I don't know what the first two movies cost. This one was reported to be $130 million. I suspect it was a lot more.
I suspect. I mean, because we're spending like about 90% of it in the quantum realm.
Yeah, and basically after the first 15 minutes of the film, not even, maybe even less, every shot is a massive effect shot. I can't ever imagine someone spending that sort of money on a comedy, which is what this is, really, for me. I like it. It's just like this is or an adventure comedy.
Yeah, I mean, of the three films, it's certainly the least comedic, I would say.
Do you think so?
Yes. It's still very funny, but I wouldn't, if this were the first Ant-Man film, I wouldn't go in and say, oh, well, that was a fun little comedy, which I could really easily say about the other two.
That's fair, yeah. And I feel that the comedy was almost the primary driving element of those two films.
Right. Whereas this is more of, I mean, this is more of a, adventure, as you say. And it's, there's a lot more sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Wide-ranging stakes, I guess. The first two films it's slightly more personal stakes, and it's on a much smaller scale. Funnily, no pun intended. Whereas this is like, multiversal timeline, echoing stakes within this film.
Were you expecting it to be that going in?
Yes.
Right. And you feel it delivered on that?
Yes.
Okay. I want to come back to that because there were some things to say to that a slight disagreement, but also in a way do agree with you. But we'll come back to that. I found this very much to be a film about ego and how you can let your ego run away with you, and that even if you are quote unquote the good guy, you can still be a victim of your own kind of
hubris,
and self-importance in a way, and I think that plays out in nearly every major character in this, with perhaps the exception of Janet, but I think that plays out in nearly every major character, because when you look at the kind of ego of Scott, it's got a bit out of control.
Yep, they established that right away with the book signing and the the adoration of the public.
Did you know that Marvel published that book? Like, you can actually go and buy.
Oh wow! Okay, I gotta get it.
I mean, I don't know how well written it is, but yeah, you can. I mean,
you got a little taste of that in the film itself,
which is like I don't know anyone who reads the ending of the book. Speaking of writing, this film written by Jeff Loveness, this is the first Ant-Man film that's not had a writing credit for Paul Rudd on. Because where he seemed to be very much involved in the physical writing of the last two, not so in this one apparently, and I wonder if that's partly behind the tonal shift. I mean, obviously, there's the necessity of the general overreaching Marvel plot that must always kind of be served, but I still found it a very, very entertaining picture. Like I found it kind of really interesting and beautiful to look at. I mean, the quantum realm is just magnificently kind of represented.
Yeah.
And it did. And in watching the first two movies, particularly with the first one, I think there's always got to be an element of horror in this kind of stuff when you're dealing with, shrinking people down. And I recall things like The Incredible Shrinking Man, which I don't know if you've ever seen, but is a magnificent movie. And it's about a guy who somehow begins to shrink and is left kind of he has to live in his own house, but inside a doll's house in his own house as he gets smaller and smaller and smaller, and eventually is reduced to kind of fighting spiders to try and survive. And it just an incredible movie. Obviously you're dealing with. No, you've never seen it. I would track that down if I were you and give it a look. It's magnificent. Very good, like pulpy B movie. But he talks about the fact that obviously if he keeps going down, reducing down, eventually he'll become nothing.
Right.
And how he can still find meaning in that. And I feel there's echoes of that, and there's echoes of that kind of horror. And I think about the first movie when Corey Stoll is running around zapping people and turning them into pulp, like little bloody messes of goo. And that is a real kind of horror element. And I feel that this kind of touched on some of that, but not quite, because it just is a very fantastical sci-fi movie. And I wasn't expecting to spend as long in the quantum realm as we did.
I mean, it's virtually the entire film.
Yeah. Like I was surprised, and it's one of the shorter Marvel movies, 2 hours, 4 minutes. But I just really didn't expect it to kind of take that deep dive and go, no, this is the movie. This is the world we're dealing with. Did you like that fact?
I did. I think, like I adored the first two films. For what they are, I think they're very kind of, like in terms of Marvel film, they're kind of humble, like, in their sort of scope of what, how far reaching they try to be. Like I said before, it's kind of like, on this more personal scale, like they're kind of, like the heart of them is, the relationships, which that, remains true in this story too. It's about, Scott's relationship with his daughter. It's about his relationship with Hope. It's about her relationships with her parents. So it becomes this kind of like, like family film almost. And whereas the first two, it's like, they really, kind of are about Scott and his character growth. Again, no pun intended. This is like, it's a different film. And for me, that's a good thing because, I feel like, that's more exciting. I feel like instead of trying to replicate what the first two films were, which were both like great films, loved them, similar in tone, kind of relied on some of the same gimmicks that were actually super fun and effective, like, the Luis like catch up and, little things like that. His gang of like, former criminal buddies and all that stuff. I felt like it was really smart for them to just be like, nope, actually, remember, he's an Avenger. This is like, we can take him on, in a different direction. We can do, tell these other kinds of stories that really work with this character. Quantum realm stuff works really well with Ant-Man. And so why not do that? Instead of kind of playing it safe and just repeating what we've already done, let's do something different that furthers the overall story that we're telling. Because really, I think the mission of this film was to introduce Kang to the wider audience. Of course, we, people who watch the Disney Plus shows have already seen a variant of Kang, He Who Remains, in the Loki series. But this is the cinematic debut of Kang, who we know is going to be a really important figure going forward. And basically the Thanos, the big bad of this next phase of films. And really, that the bottom line for this movie was to introduce him as the big threat that we're going to face going forward. And I thought it did a fantastic job of that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a fascinating actor to watch because when you look at him, and I found this in Loki for the episode that he's in, that he looks like a man who's hearing voices. Do you know what I mean? Like, he really does look like a man who's attuned to something else, and he's listening to other noise, And I don't mean to imply from that he's sort of mentally maladjusted or anything like that, but he does seem mentally maladjusted, And I think that's all his performance. It's funny. I was reading, a lot's been made recently of the fact that he apparently walked out of his first Marvel meeting because they kept him waiting too long. Like they were running late, like the casting directors running out, and it was just a general meeting. It wasn't a kind of we want you for a specific role. It was kind of what they call a general meeting, which is where actors will meet directors and producers or what have you, just to kind of get a feel for who they are and that they might be good for this part or that part. And I think it was about 2 to 4 years after that they came back to him and went, okay, we've got this role. But he apparently was on his way out the door. And luckily the casting director did arrive and sort of interceded. So again, it's that thing of different converging timelines.
Right.
What would the alternate timeline have been where it's not Jonathan Majors?
I'm glad it was. I mean, having seen him, particularly in this film, I thought he was very good in Loki. But I think this kind of really cements it for me that, like, wow, this is like the perfect casting choice for this character. Because in part because it's like such a different performance to the character he played in Loki, which is absolutely spot on for the idea that they present. It's not the same Kang.
No.
No. And so of course they would be very different performances.
And I thought really that we'd get like. I was surprised when they introduced this idea, and obviously, just to warn everyone, we will go full spoiler on this. But they introduced this idea that he's there by exile. He's been exiled to the quantum realm. And when they first introduced that idea, my mind was buzzing with, okay, who's exiled him? Who has kind of put him down there? And I was thinking, could it be Doom? Because we know from the comic character that he is, by all accounts, a descendant of Doctor Doom.
Right, which is a sort of maybe sort of thing, because of course, he also is, in the same bloodline as Reed Richards.
Reed Richards, his name is Nathaniel Richards. Yeah.
Nathaniel Richards, yes, correct. So
the Doctor
Doom thing has never really been like made super clear how exactly he would be related to Doom, although it is absolutely canon. But yeah, it could have been that. It could, it could have been all sorts of things. But then the thing that ends up making the most sense is what it actually is.
Yeah.
Which is
before we get to that, though,
yeah.
I did also think, because we've got Secret Wars coming up, we know that Kang is going to figure partly Secret Wars. My mind did briefly go, and because we've got the Marvels coming up with Monica Rambeau and as Photon, and in the most recent run of Photon, the primary kind of agitator seems to be the Beyonder. And for a moment, my mind did go, geez, I wonder if there's, the next sort of level of power up is the Beyonder, and the Beyonder's kind of gone, nope, getting rid of you.
Yeah. I mean, the Beyonder has actually been featured recently a couple of times in the current Marvel, Marvel comics, like the Defenders Beyond series, is very Beyonder centric. So I wonder if maybe that is a character that we're going to see fairly soon.
Yeah, but I don't know. Is that going to happen? Who knows? Maybe they won't go down that route for Secret Wars. We also get double villain duty on this because we get it's unloved MODOK. Yeah. Which is great. And you may remember me asking you, sort of teasing this a couple of weeks back when we did the Black Panther video, which was, do you know what the kind of secret to MODOK is? Because some eagle-eyed viewers pulled some scenes from the trailer or shots from the trailer and did actually kind of spot ahead of time who was behind the face.
Really? Oh, okay. I didn't know. I didn't read any spoilers.
And I'd seen, you're really good for that. You never read spoilers. Whereas I kind of do tend, being online a bit more, I do tend to come across these things. And so that did kind of get spoiled for me.
Right, because that's like, it's a retcon. It's, it's not the character from the comics, who is like, sort of an AIM agent, who becomes like affected and warped into MODOK.
And MODOK, they've kind of turned MODOK into this. I mean, I don't know him too well from the comics, but he's kind of been turned into this figure of fun.
Right. I mean, because he's such a goofy design,
Yeah. And bless him for embracing it in a way. But I don't know how true to that is kind of roots of the character that is. But from the MODOK TV show, he's kind of been turned into a figure of fun. And from the most recent MODOK series, where he was kind of undone by the bureaucracy of AIM, and which was quite funny in the first issue to see, where he's kind of getting really frustrated with just effectively all the I's he's got a dot and the T's he's got a cross. So we have Kang and henchmen, and as you say, I'm sorry, we did skip over the point. Kang has been exiled by other Kangs, by the other versions of himself, which kind of resonates as to how dangerous he is as a character. But I wasn't expecting that. I wasn't expecting it to be other versions when they said, "Oh,"
which of course ends up making total sense. It's okay. It's like the Kang Dynasty. You know, that's of course it is.
But I mean that kind of gave us an interesting spin on things, but it also suggests that other versions of Kang might be a bit more benevolent. Although by the end, I don't know, maybe not.
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, because as we see with this Kang and with the with Who Remains, they both think of themselves as the tragic, heroic figure, which leads you to think, well, does do all of these Kangs consider themselves to be the hero of their story? They probably do, because essentially they are still the same man in a sense, iterations of the same man. So with He Who Remains, he alluded to the other Kangs as well. You know, when he tells Loki and Sylvie that, you know, oh, well, you know, if you think I'm bad, you know, you wouldn't want to meet my variants.
Well, he actually, the one he really warns about is this particular Kang, right?
Kang.
Like, so I guess it's between, you know, somewhere between those things happening. We've had this sort of exile, and of course, time moves differently in the quantum realm. So, but you know, true to his name, he's gone off and he's conquered the quantum realm effectively, and oppressed all these people. So we get, you know, William Harper Jackson playing Quark, or Quaz, sorry, kind of a telepathic. Would you say leader of the resistance, or just I don't know?
No, he's not the leader. The leader is I can't remember the actress's name, but I think it's like Katie O'Brien or something like that. But she's a martial artist, and she's really the leader. But he seems to be one of her right-hand men.
And also, we do get one of Scott's sort of cadre of idiot friends, as they've been called. We get, because David Destimation, which I didn't realize until the end, does the voice of Veb, who's the kind of
I hadn't realized that either until after the fact.
Which is really nice. But I liked this kind of new batch of sort of more sci-fi based characters. And also, I liked the fact that we've got Cassie kind of coming up the kind of chain of the food chain, if you like, of Marvel superheroes.
Right. Now, you know, as I say every time, it's like, yep, okay, there's another notch in their belt, like setting up the Young Avengers.
Although someone from Marvel did come out this week and say there are no plans for a Young Avengers movie.
Well, that's just them, you know, saying, you know, saying what they're going to say, of course. But, you know, it's like, well, maybe that's just them saying it's going to be a Disney Plus series instead.
Yeah. Now, the interesting thing with Cassie is she's kind of inherited Scott's activism, because we know that when he was in prison in the first movie, it's because he hacked into a company that he'd worked for and you know, redistributed some of their money, as it were. So there is a strong sense of kind of activism in Scott. Sorry, you have to give me, I'll keep itching my eyes because I've got some sort of allergy at the moment that's proving a bit tricky. And I think she's inherited that. And Scott has this kind of mantra that forms the end of his book, which is always look out for the little guy, but he doesn't live up to that.
Well, yeah, at the point that we sort of meet him in this story, you know, he's quite content to just kind of, you know, be revered as, like, you know, Ant-Man. You know, he's finally kind of being recognized as a hero. He's an Avenger. He's got a, you know, he's reading from his book. He's got all these like adoring fans, and he's just kind of enjoying it. And he's kind of like looking the other way a little bit, like saying, oh, well, you know, all the bad stuff is over, so now I can just enjoy my life. Which of course is never true. You know, if you're an Avenger, then you've always got problems.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's kind of got his head buried a little bit. And Cassie is the one who's trying to remind him, actually, you know, yeah, just because it's not happening to you doesn't mean it's not happening.
Yeah. And I think there's a good sense of kind of social responsibility in Cassie. You know, when we meet her, she's in jail, having been arrested for kind of being part of a protest. And again, you're seeing that in itself ties up to Endgame, because it's people being sort of made homeless by the blip and now living in camps, and the police come along and trying to clear that camp. And I think there's some interesting stuff about the post Endgame world, post blip world that would be kind of nice to see addressed. But when you zap down to the quantum world, as above, so below, Kang is clearing way, you know, for his kind of his empire. So all of that is a kind of fascinating resonance that I think really works for the film. And as you say, makes it a bit more of a serious film than
the first two.
The first two, yeah. But it's also it's very much, I found, Janet's movie.
Yes, yeah, that was actually something that I really liked. We finally get answers about what she was doing in the quantum realm for 30 years, and how important that turns out to be. And we really get to know her character, because obviously in the previous two films, we kind of find her, we eventually meet her, she's rescued, but now we see what she went through while she was there.
And I think she kind of slides back into that freedom fighter role quite easily. And I really liked that about her character. And it was great to see her kind of do more. And she does a staggering amount in this. She's really, for the first major act of the movie, she is the focus. And I found it to be her sort of story that's more the kind of the more serious of the two kind of plot lines, because we've got Scott and Cassie on one side of the quantum realm, and Hank, Janet, and Hope on another. And it was nice the way that they split those into families as well. You have the Langs and you have the Van Dyne or the Pims. And I thought it was fascinating kind of seeing that angle and seeing how that worked. I just really, really enjoyed that side of it. But we also kind of get the reveal that Janet had a little bit of a side piece while she was down there.
Yeah. And who else would it be?
I was genuinely expecting it to be Kang, because I thought that there would be, maybe the backstory would have been that Bill Murray, not Bill Murray's character, but that Janet and Kang had perhaps fallen in love while they were down there, because they kind of keep their relationship on the kind of down low a bit, really, and it's not really until Bill Murray arrives on the scene that we learn about Kang properly. I liked Bill Murray's cameo, but I felt like it could have been played by any actor. You know?
Yeah, but it was a treat to have it be Bill Murray.
Yeah.
I'll take it anytime.
And it was very he's only in one scene,
really. Yeah, exactly. And it's the character itself, himself is kind of a throwaway character, who I think only appeared in one issue of the Hulk ever.
Yeah.
So it's not like I think it was just kind of a treat to see Bill Murray pop up in a Marvel film, and and just as it's done in one.
I think there's a weird thing that goes on now. It's been going on for a while. Is that people feel that being in a Marvel film is the highest possible compliment for an actor. I disagree. But
I think that they, I can't remember who we were talking about, but and maybe it wasn't even you or I having this conversation, but there had been, it was Harrison Ford.
Yeah, it was you and I.
Harrison Ford just, wanted to, apparently just thought it was looked like a lot of fun.
Sure. No, I can see that. But I mean, there's a lot of kind of weird fan casting that goes on where a moment an actor becomes modern. It happens a lot with newer actors now, or that an older actor pops up on their radar. It's just like, put them in a Marvel movie, and it's just like, look, it's not.
No, I disagree.
Oh, I don't know. That's a discussion maybe for another time. But they're yeah, I feel like it could have been done by any actor.
It could have, but it was cooler that it was Bill Murray.
But it's a good scene. It's a nice, fun scene, and also it kind of reveals to Hank that she wasn't down there pining for him, which again attacks that kind of thing of ego, because Hank has a huge ego, as we know from the first two movies, particularly the first one. and everyone feels like they're a victim of Hank's ego. Hope, Darren Cross, all feel like they're a kind of victim of his kind of own sort of self hubris and arrogance about his work. And again, that thing plays out to Krylar, who's now Lord Krylar, as we learn, and to MODOK. Again, Darren Cross's ego has been given kind of full rent and reign. Also, I think there's an interesting theme in the film, which is if you're this big and your whole world is, whatever, let's say you're an insect, like an ant, that's the world for you. That's your world. You don't assume that there's a larger world around you. And I think it's hard to really quantify the scope of the world around you. And I think humans have a lot of trouble doing that. When you talk about things like space exploration, but I think it's also hard for us to go the other way and think about the world that kind of exists inside and around us and beneath us and things like that. And what was interesting about the threat level of this is I found it difficult in the movie to equate the threat of Kang with the outside world, because I don't think we got enough of the full size world, really. And I would say that's the one thing that I felt was a kind of detriment to the movie for me, was that I didn't necessarily get that sense that Kang is a threat to everything else, simply because of the environment he was in. I know they said he was, and I know he certainly demonstrates how powerful he is and how technologically advanced he is, but I feel there was something missing from the juxtaposition of the two.
Okay. I mean, I did.
But that's my only detriment.
Really, like, because we do see how powerful a figure he is. We see it in the glimpses. We see like Janet's, willingness to, to sacrifice herself to keep him from, from seeing through his plans. And, I feel like we do, for me, I felt the threat of like how dangerous it would be if he were to escape the quantum realm. And, which, for me, that was enough. It was,
I perhaps would have liked to have seen him escape, but then be utterly defeated by something completely innocuous. Do you know what I mean? Like, but just just something
I think the threat of him escaping was the story.
Yeah.
Like,
oh yeah, no, totally. I'm just kind of
like to allow. I felt like if they had actually allowed him, to escape, then that would be kind of game over for however the way things are sort of going to progress would just be it would be too big an event.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I see where you are with that, and you are absolutely right. It's just my mind is going kind of my mind goes in odd directions when I look at movies, and I sometimes kind of have a weird wish fulfillment things like that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it would be like them defeating Thanos in, the beginning of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 or something.
Yeah. Fair enough. I mean, it doesn't mean he can't come back, as we've discovered, though. I mean, I do want to talk about some of the other cast members a bit, like Catherine Newton. I really I liked her performance in this. I've not seen her in much, personally.
She was in, I think, Big Little Lies. She was in Big Little Lies.
Right. Playing one of the daughters of Reese Witherspoon?
Yeah.
Right. Well, it's certainly a series I loved, both seasons of. I've seen her in Freaky, which I don't know if you've taken a look at.
Not yet.
No? Okay. I certainly recommend that. That's like
I've heard it's good.
Very interesting horror take on Freaky Friday. I thought she was great. I thought Corey Stoll as MODOK was fantastic. I think the complete willingness to have himself look as stupid as possible.
Right. I love that. I mean,
I realise that it's not physically him.
No, but it was very funny, and he just rolled with the punches of it.
Yeah.
And I loved the little line between the two of them, where he's I am MODOK, mechanized organism designed only for killing. Yeah. She's like, well, isn't that MODOK? Or
absolutely, yeah. And of course, the final sort of, it's never too late not to be a dick.
Yeah, he had some of the best lines in the film. Like, as far as comedy, totally. I loved his death scene. Where he's like, you were a brother to me, and you can just see Scott like, yeah, you're brothers, yeah. It's like, at least I died an Avenger.
I absolutely loved it.
You're in, I mean, I was cracking up.
Again, ego, right? I mean, I've got to commend them for keeping that theme all the way through, and for allowing that to kind of invest every sort of writing decision and directorial decision, and even down to things like Cassie's developing a bit of an ego because she's intelligent, she's passionate, and she wants to grow up, which Scott is kind of hampering, or she views that Scott is hampering. But finally she grows up in front of his eyes, which I thought was I know it was a very on the nose moment,
but it was very sweet.
But even so, and I found that moment where they kind of run towards each other and they hug, is a fairly kind of standard scene in any movie.
And but the fact that they were both like 450 feet tall at the time.
Yeah, but it's given extra resonance here because it recalls the moment in Endgame, of course, where they see each other for the first time, and there is a kind of extra level resonance there. And yeah, I just really found myself sort of 100% enjoying this.
Yeah.
And I didn't expect to. Going in, I really didn't expect to. As I said, I'm very ambivalent towards the Marvel movies at the moment. And funny enough, I was talking to our pal Keith a couple of hours ago, who runs Home Media Minefield, which is another great channel that you guys should check out. And they do fantastic shows on sci-fi TV and films, and they've just started their one on Picard, which is up right now, and you should give that a look. But he said like he feels like he's done with Marvel. He's had like his out point now.
That's a perfectly reasonable, I mean, if because it does keep coming. It is a big engine that just keeps putting stuff out. And if you're tired of it, just stop watching them,
Yeah. Yeah.
He said that from the equation.
He feels that he got enough with phases 1 to 3, and he's happy. And but he's found phase 4 really difficult to kind of contend with, and I get that. But I did advise him. There's a few of the shows he hasn't watched, and I was like, look, like I would give the shows a look. In particular, Miss Marvel and She-Hulk, I would give those a look because I think they're worth making the effort. But I think he feels the meta elements of She-Hulk are probably a bit too.
It's funny that you would recommend those two in particular to him, because I don't think that either of those are really his jam.
No, and that's why I think he should watch them.
Okay, all right, yeah, because like I mean, for me, there would have been others that would have been like, oh, but you should really watch this one.
Yeah, so he's watched Hawkeye, and again, I'm not, when I say he's kind of had enough of them, I'm not saying it to his detriment.
No, I'm just like knowing his taste. I just I would have thought there would have been others that would have appealed to him more, maybe in terms of like larger plot stuff.
Yeah, I think we might see an interesting thing in movies this year, where I think other franchises and other storylines might start to reassert themselves over the movie going landscape, and I'm all for that. I don't think it should necessarily be drawn as a competition. I think you should kind of like what you like, and that's cool. And I've got no issue of that, even though sometimes I do find myself getting drawn into the kind of more argumentative side of it. But as a start to Phase 5 and as a Marvel movie, I found this particularly kind of joyful and fun and interesting.
I liked it. I liked it on every level because I think it does what it needs to do in terms of servicing the characters, and giving you a really nice continuation to the films that came before it, the two previous Ant-Man films, but also sort of going outside of its comfort zone, like in terms of those films. If this turns out to be a trilogy, I think it's kind of a bold step for it to just like say, actually, no, this, I'm not going to follow this, this formula that, has sort of defined the previous two films, and just does a totally different thing, which was, pretty ambitious. It's 90% in this, fantastical other world. And then, on another level, it takes, a big step toward furthering, like the story of Phase 5 by introducing the central villain, creating a really, really charismatic and fascinating central villain, and giving you a really strong grip on who he is and what his motivations are.
Yeah.
And like you said, I think it also, does some really interesting metaphorical stuff. In terms of, as you say, ego, which is like a really defining characteristic of all the characters in the film, particularly Kang.
Completely. He's entirely driven by his own hubris. I mean, he's. I think the Conqueror is a suffix he's added to his own name.
Right. Right, and he manages to still be somewhat relatable. I think he put in a fantastic performance, because as menacing as he is, there are moments where you're empathetic toward him, and particularly like the moments he shares with Janet. You have this mixture of menace and almost kind of pathos, and it was a great performance. And I'm really excited to see him as the next big bad. I think
if indeed it is this version of Kang, I mean, we're told in the end credits Kang will return.
Yeah.
However, this version of Kang seems to be
if not dead, but like, I mean, he doesn't die explicitly. It's like he could have been sent into like a time vortex, which is what happens to Ant-Man in Ant-Man 2.
Indeed, yeah. But also we do get to see, we've got to talk about the stinger scenes, right? I mean, we get to see our first look at Ramatut, the Egyptian.
We see a number of different Kangs now. Kang is a character with a lot of baggage in terms of backstory and identities. So in our stinger, we see like this, Kang dynasty. We see okay, these are the ones who sent him to exile. And presumably we've got Ramatut, we've got Immortus. I can't remember the other ones that you see, but he has a lot of different aliases and identities. With Kang, it's it's a long list. So it's it can be somewhat convoluted for people who aren't familiar with the character. It's like I said, it can be a lot of baggage, but I'm sure over the next batch of films, some of that will get explained.
It would be
who all of these
interesting to
identities are.
sorry.
Oh,
It would almost be interesting to see, as each new Marvel movie comes out, that a version of Kang is the villain in every one.
That could absolutely be the case.
Although I certainly think I think it's a possibility that Beyonder might become. I don't know what the story is with the Marvels. I don't know if you've heard, like, the Marvels has been pushed back now until November.
Again. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they've released a new poster for it, a gorgeous poster that everyone has kind of made a real fuss of, and I recommend that you take a look at. But that poster also says November, like it's November 24th, I think now.
Well, you know.
But I think there's still room for. Do we know who the big bad of that is? We don't yet. Do we?
I don't.
No, I don't. And
yeah,
I wonder if we're going to get the Beyonder there, because I think there's lots of room for that character to come through, and that character can take other forms. So we've seen in the most recent Monica Rambeau series, the most recent Photon series, that character appears as a sort of either a more androgynous character or a woman, which again would be keeping thematically with Captain Marvel and then that universe, that sort of series of movies. Also in this, we get one more Stinger scene. Did you stay right to the end, Liz?
Of course, Paul, really.
You know how much I would have loved it if you had walked out midway.
What kind of novice do you think I am?
Did we get?
That
so
was,
I just want to tell.
I mean, you should have seen my little face.
Well, actually, Liz, I can. I can't remember what movie we went to see, but back when Liz was living here, we got to see an early screening of one of the Marvel movies, and I will never forget. So we're watching the movie, and it was something in 3D, so we had those big freaking glasses on. But it was hilarious. We got to like the Stinger scene of whatever movie it was, and I wish I could remember which one it was. But I kind of briefly turned to look at Liz, and all I saw was Liz do this. These huge glasses. And it was just like so I don't need to. I will always picture that whenever I see one of these end scenes.
Yeah. As soon as Loki pops up, you should have seen me bouncing around.
That was not. I was really kind of.
I had no idea. Yeah, that was. Yeah. I was not expecting that at all. But that was how cool was that?
And we're introduced to another version of Kang there as well, Mr. Timely, who apparently does have some basis in the comics.
Right, yeah.
I haven't had a chance to kind of read up on that, but now I will.
It's a version that goes back in time to like 1901 or early 18th century, whatever, and so it gives us a little hint at what we might expect from Loki season 2.
Yeah.
So I wonder, is this the first time that that a Marvel film or Stinger has like really directly referenced back to one of the shows?
I think so. If someone out there knows for sure that is or not the case, do drop us a comment, because I'd love to hear from you guys. In fact, drop us a comment about anything we've talked about in the show. Can you tell us more about the different versions of Kang? Can you tell us who that other version of Kang was? Because as Liz pointed out,
which other version?
We had Rama Immortus, and there was that third
Victor
version.
Timely at the end.
No, and the third one.
I can't remember. I just can't remember. I mean, there's Scarlet Centurion and Iron Lad. There's Mr. Griffin, which is like a businessman, with which they do make a direct reference to when you see the fallen tower that says Kang Tower, but like with a Q. That's a reference to the Mr. Griffin persona, who's like a businessman CEO, who owns like Kang Industries or something, something to that effect. Right. So
just quickly, I do want to give a shout out to Brian Bullen and his page AWA The Upshot Is, which is a page on Facebook all about AWA comics. Not Marvel, but that's fine. That's fine. There are other comics out there. I just wanted to give him a shout because he kind of shared a review I did a while ago for the comic series Out, which we talked about. It's way back. I think like over a year ago now on one of the comic space shows. And AWA picked up on that. AWA shared it. Rob Williams shared it. He was the writer of the series. So thank you to Brian Bullen. Do check out that page on Facebook if you like AWA comics. It's Brian does these great little capsule reviews and always highlights other members of the group and what they're reading. And it's a really good community. I can't stress the importance of finding good, friendly communities in comics if you're kind of getting into comics or the Marvel movies. Do kind of give those guys a shout. And also to AWA, thank you so much for sharing that review because it gets more eyes on the Comic Crush. Please do check out the Comic Crush and the Patreon. That is really important to me because even at £2 a month, it does really help because, you know, I want to keep going with this and, you know, want to expand and make more of the site and the podcasts. Liz, anything else you want to say about the movie before we
sign off?
Yeah, disappear into the quantum realm.
I really loved it. I thought it was really great. I thought that great performances from all the actors. It's got a great cast. I did, you know, I because we didn't actually sort of there really weren't too many negatives for me at all.
No.
I would say that I hope we get more time with Hope in the next film. Because I think of all the characters, unfortunately, she kind of fell by the wayside a little bit. But I loved how they styled her in this movie. Because I kept almost calling her Janet in my mind because she looks so much like the Janet Von Dyne of the comics.
Yeah.
You know, it's like they finally really, you know, I mean, because she's always been this sort of amalgamation, you know, of you know, the kind of Janet Von Dyne character that we know from the comics, and then, you know, she was a character kind of created for the films. I love Evangeline Lilly, and you know, so I hope we get to see a little more of her. I think it was just, you know, servicing the story. They just kind of had to minimize some of the roles. I think, you know, in order to really flesh out Michelle Pfeiffer's Janet and give more time to Catherine Newton as Cassie, you know, we had slightly smaller roles for Hope and for Hank in this film. But I'd love to see another Ant-Man movie. You know, I don't know if we will. It would be okay if this was a trilogy, but I'd love to see another one. And I
would. I genuinely really enjoyed going back. And in fact, I would say they were on a par with the best of the Marvel movies for me. You know, things like Winter Soldier, and although completely different stylistically,
completely different,
tonally, but very, very entertaining. I did miss Luis and the others in this. I would have liked to have seen a recap done in Lewis's inimitable style at the beginning of the movie.
I actually thought that it worked better not to have that the third time. Yeah, I think that that might have actually been beating a dead horse a little bit for me. Like, I thought it was so fun in the first two that I wouldn't want them to sort of make it a tired trope, you know, within Ant-Man films. I thought actually it worked better to skip it this time, but maybe hopefully we'd see another one another time.
I actually forgot that it's one of Lewis's sort of reminiscences at the end of Ant-Man 2 that leads us into kind of Civil War and that stuff.
It's
and again, I was really praying for, although it would have been so tonally out of whack, that I wish they'd kind of done it for the internet crowd, a recap of the entire MCU up to Endgame just by Luis. We've
talked about this, you know, before. I don't think on the
someone online suggested it, and it was just like, please do it. Just quickly, any reads to tie into this that you'd recommend? Any comics?
I mean, I think just doing your homework on Kang really is the thing. Because you know, they, as I said, you know, somewhat of a convoluted backstory. So they've just released like sort of a large volume called, I think, the Kang Saga. Which collects different Kang storylines, you know, some miniseries, probably Avengers issue 8, probably some just key Kang stories, which would probably be a good place to start. And there's also recently out in Marvel Epic Collection, the Kang War, which I think is is again a very famous Kang storyline, which, you know, features the multiple variants of Kang. And so I think that stuff, I know that your beloved
Only Myself to Conquer.
Only Myself to Conquer.
Gorgeous comic by Colin Kelly and Jackson Lansing. I can't rate it high enough. Also, Avengers Forever would be one to certainly take a look
Avengers
at.
Forever.
There's also in the UK, there's Marvel Villains Kang. I actually forgot to stick the comics next to me because I had brought them up. Also, Ant-Man Anniversary.
Anniversary, that was great.
Definitely
Loved
one
it.
to get. And the new Wasp comic by
Al Ewing. Yeah. Both really great.
Yeah. And there is an Ant-Man epic collection out, I believe, called The Man on the Anthill, which is the really early stuff from, I believe, Tales of Suspense.
Yeah, and there was another Ant-Man Giant Man collection that came out very recently as well, like another epic collection. I can't remember what the subtitle for it is, but there aren't very many Ant-Man epic collections, so I think it may just be the two so far. Right. So yeah, both of them would be some recommended reading, definitely.
And all the Kang stuff. I will definitely, and MODOK, of course. There's the I can't remember what the MODOK book was called that came out quite recently in the miniseries, but that's worth taking a look at. Next time, I promise to be a bit more on it, and I'll queue up all the images for the comics as well. Liz, thank you so much for doing this again. Thanks for coming on and bringing your expertise and passion to this. As always, it's been fantastic. We are going to go now, guys. At the Comic Crush, Twitter and Instagram. Find us on Facebook. Bye-bye.